A to Z Mysteries, Super Edition 2, Mayflower Treasure Hunt by Ron Roy. Chapter 5. The Mayflower Jewels, Dink said. Tiny roots clung to it. Still, the metal looked like gold and held at least 15 blue gemstones. We were right, Josh said. Mudgett hid the loot here, then drew that picture as a map. Dink pulled his stick over and dropped the necklace into Ruth Rose's hands. I'll keep it in my sweatshirt pouch, she said. She gathered up the remnants of the leather bag and put that inside with the necklace. Just then the kids heard a long, loud horn blast in the distance. It's the ferry, Dink said. He checked his watch. 3:45. Let's go. The three kids took off running. As Dink passed the bench where the woman had been dozing, he noticed that she was gone. How does she keep disappearing? He wondered as they raced across the beach toward the ferry landing. With only a minute to spare, they tore up the walkway to the Sea Witch's outer deck. Out of breath, they stepped into the cabin and huddled on a bench. Still got it? Dink whispered to Ruth Rose. She nodded and patted the lump in her sweatshirt pouch. The final horn blast sounded, and the kids sat back. Dink closed his eyes. The boat's engine came to life, and they slowly began to move. Dink grinned. He couldn't wait to tell his mom about their adventure. She's back, Josh whispered in Dink's ear. Dink opened his eyes as Josh nudged him. The old woman had taken a seat not far from where the kids sat. Dink stared at her. Don't get paranoid, he told himself. She could be just another tourist. Maybe she just wanted to see the place where the Mayflower first landed. She's probably some nice old school teacher trying to learn more about the Pilgrims. Or maybe she's a writer doing research for a book. She's not a witch who disappears, and she's not following us. Dink relaxed. He watched through the windows as two kids and their parents tried to persuade seagulls to snatch food from their fingers. What should we do with the you-know-what? Ruth Rose asked. Sell it and get rich, Josh said. Sell it to who? Dink asked. Who'd buy it? We're not selling anything, Ruth Rose said. That package belongs to that poor woman who lost it. She's dead, Josh said. She might have relatives, Dink said. Her heirs should get it. Josh giggled. Maybe I'm her heir, he said. As the kids talked, Dink glanced over toward the old woman. At least she wasn't staring at Dink this time. She was gazing out the windows. As Dink watched, she took something from a pocket and slipped it into her mouth, then sat back and closed her eyes. The sky was growing darker. Black clouds had blocked the sun, and even inside the cabin, Dink felt cold. He shivered, shut his eyes, and huddled deeper into his sweatshirt. The boat's gentle movement made him sleepy. Wake up, Josh said, giving Dink a nudge. We're almost at the pier. Dink opened his eyes and blinked. He had been asleep. Everyone was inside the cabin now. A wind had come up, and it had grown dark. Thick snowflakes were slapping against the glass. An early moon came and went behind the black clouds. Lights in the cabin ceiling blinked on. It's 5:20, Ruth Rose said. Will your mom be upset that we're late? Probably, Dink said, but she'll forgive us when we show her the you-know-what. The ferry began to ease into its mooring place alongside the pier. The kids got in the long line of passengers, snaking its way toward the exits. The old woman was a few people ahead of Dink in the line. She had wrapped her shawl over her head and shoulders. Dink wondered how far she had to walk in the blowing snow. 10 minutes later, the kids were hurrying toward the Governor Bradford Hotel. The moon seemed to move with them. It was almost completely dark and still snowing. Dink could see their footprints on the now white sidewalk. "There it is," Dink said as the hotel came into sight. The kids brushed the snow off their shoulders and stamped their feet outside the lobby door. Dink pushed it open, half expecting to see his mother standing there with an annoyed look on her face. A woman was at the counter. Her back was to the kids, but Dink knew this wasn't his mother, with the shawl, the matted gray hair, the ankle-length dress. It was the old woman from the boat, and she was talking to the clerk. The clerk looked up and nodded toward the kids. Dink felt his throat close up. Panicked, he spun around, grabbing for Josh and Ruth Rose. He yanked them back through the door into the snow. "What's going on?" Josh asked. "It's her," Dink hissed. "That old woman has been everywhere we go, and now she's in our hotel." "Dinkus, it's not our hotel," Josh said. "She could be staying here just like us." "But I keep seeing her," Dink insisted, watching through the window. The woman was hurrying toward the door. "She's coming outside," Dink cried. "Let's get out of here." The kids raced away from the hotel entrance. Dink pulled Josh and Ruth Rose behind a row of hedges near the street. The old woman was standing in front of the hotel. She was looking around, one hand shielding her eyes. "She's looking for us," Dink whispered. "I was right. She's after us." "But who is she?" Ruth Rose asked. Josh giggled. "She's Emma Brown's ghost," he whispered. "She knows you have her jewels." As they watched, the woman took a few steps toward them. She glanced down at the ground, then looked directly at the hedges. "She saw the footprints," Dink hissed. "She knows we're here. Come on." With Dink in the lead, the kids took off across the street. They hid behind a dumpster and watched the hotel. The old woman was standing near the hedges now, bent over. "Dink, we're gonna freeze out here," Josh said. "Our parents will find us on Thanksgiving. 3 ice sculptures." "Josh is right," Ruth Rose said. "We can't just stand out here all night." Dink blew snowflakes out of his eyes. "All she has to do is follow our footprints," he said. "We have to hide until she gives up." "We could go back to the boat," Ruth Rose said. "The ferry," Dink said. He spit snow out of his mouth. "No, the Mayflower," Ruth Rose said over the wind. "She won't bother us with a crowd of people around." "It's worth a try," Dink said. He looked up at all the falling snowflakes. "Maybe the new snow will cover our tracks." It took them only a few minutes to reach the Mayflower, too. It sat in the harbor, rocking on small waves as the wind blew snowflakes around its dark shape. Over the wind, Dink could hear the sail ropes thunking against the tall wooden masts. Dink found a trash can and lifted the lid. He pulled out a newspaper and handed Josh and Ruth Rose each a section. "Let's use these to wipe away our footprints," he said. The kids walked backward, brushing their footprints with the papers. When they got to the boat, they stuffed the newspapers inside their sweatshirts. They ran up the gangway toward the fence and gate that let visitors onto the boat. "The gate is locked," Ruth Rose said. "The Mayflower is closed." Dink turned and peered back the way they'd come. In his mind, he saw the old woman following their footprints. Would the snow cover them? Would she be fooled by their attempt to wipe their tracks away? Guys, I might have messed up, Dink admitted. If we'd stayed at the hotel, that woman couldn't have done anything to us. Not with the clerk there. We could have just run up to our rooms. It's too late to worry about that now, Ruth Rose said. Besides, it was my idea to come to the Mayflower. I didn't know it would be closed. She peered through the locked gate. Let's climb over the fence. If we can hide on the Mayflower, she'll never find us. She's right, Josh said. He put his arm around Dink's shoulder. We can pretend we're the Pilgrims during their first snowstorm in America. Ruth Rose began climbing. The boys found toeholds and followed her. Once they were inside the fence, they ran aboard the Mayflower too. The ship looked ghostly under a covering of snow. The wind blew snow into their faces and froze their eyelashes. We have to get out of this snow, Josh said. He blew into his hands. Okay, let's go downstairs, Dink suggested. He led them past the dark galley. Now that they were out of the wind and snow, they felt warmer. They climbed down the stairs to the deck where the Pilgrims had lived and slept. It was completely dark, only the moon's dim glow making its way into the space. Dink stopped over the grate that led down to the hold. This is creepy, Josh whispered. His voice shook either from cold or fear. Dink peered down through the grate into the darkness. It'll be warmer down there, he said, pointing. Suddenly, they heard a thump on the deck above them. They jumped, bumping into each other. Josh fell over a pile of something and sprawled onto the floor. It's her! Help me move the grate, Dink whispered. The three kids tugged the wooden grate about 15 inches. A few more inches and we can fit, Dink said. How do we get down there? Ruth Rose asked. It's deep. There are some mattresses right below us, Dink said. I remember them. Are you sure? Josh asked. No, Dink said. And he jumped.